Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Bobby Bama Brigade Module 1 training session. This is going to be interesting for all of us. This is the first time that I've attempted to record a training session, so hopefully it won't be too painful. Hopefully you'll bear with me and cut me just a little slack on my presentation because it's brand new to me. One thing I wanted to do before we get started is I wanted to make a couple of explanations that I think have been kind of lacking. Everyone understands, I think, especially the active brigade members, the basic beginning of the Bobby Bama Brigade began as a Discord channel where we all came together and became friends, associates, however you want to term the phrase. We are geographically situated throughout the United States. It's become a pretty tight-knit group. It's a go-to group for many of us to ask questions, to pose questions and get some feedback, discuss kit, training aids, the whole 9 yards. But the other part of it that I think that's gotten missed, I know I mentioned it briefly in the introduction to the brigade, is exactly how it's structured. One, it's structured as the mutual readiness network where we all come together, we all become a part and pick our level of activity. Some people check in once a week, some people check in once a month, some people check in hourly. There's different levels of participation, and that's completely up to each and every individual member of the brigade. The other things that we offer in there is that, and I'm going to read a little introduction about how the training works here shortly, but we also have what's known as the Civilian Readiness Network. That's where groups of members, if you're geographically situated to where you can do so, it's an informal group that can be formed at a local level, espousing the brigade training information and setup and these sort of things, so where you can build your own local civilian readiness network, or a mini brigade or a platoon, or I don't know, I'm not military so I can't explain it to you in those terms, but a local group of like-minded folks that can get together and train and fellowship, just however you want to do it. It's all very informal, and how formal it gets is based on whoever sets up the CRN and how they want to operate it. That's totally outside of the line and scope of what the brigade's about, but it is an option, and this is one of the things that we want to train towards, is while this is an individual network of people, we are hoping that what will happen is that not only will you gain the personal individual knowledge that you need to make yourself ready, your family, your core group, however you want to describe that, but we also want it to be something that can be expandable, and we're kind of hoping that one of the things we will do is we will train the trainer, which goes a long ways into understanding the concepts of the brigade, the training that'll go on, and to pass that along to others, so that when and if you do formulate a group, have a like-minded group of folks together, that you will all be at the same level of understanding, the same level of training, but somebody has to be in charge. So we're hoping it'll be one of our brigade members that takes the bull by the horn and organizes a local group and trains from there to make the group ready. So anyway, let me read you just a little bit about how the Bobby Bama Brigade training works. The training system is designed to be practical, scalable, and grounded in real-world readiness, not theory for theory's sake. At its core, the training is built around a layered curriculum that starts with foundational concepts and progresses into applied skills and drills. Rather than overwhelming members with large volumes of information up front, the system introduces key readiness principles in a structured way, focusing on first on mindset, prioritization, and simple and actionable capabilities. From there, the training, hopefully, if it goes the way it's supposed to, expands into more advanced areas such as resource management, scenario-based thinking, and coordinated group readiness. Every piece of the curriculum is designed to answer a simple question: what can you actually do with this in real life? You know, that's one thing that preppers, prepared citizens, modern Minutemen is, I know at least in my situation, my wife's like, so what are you going to do with this in real life? Well, we're hoping that this will provide the answers to that, and everyone will be prepared. Delivery of the training is intentionally flexible to match decentralized nature of the brigade. Again, we're scattered throughout the 50 states, and it would be very difficult to have it would be fun to have an in-person classroom setting, but it's not very practical. Members can engage with training individually, in small informal groups, or as part of the larger Civilian Readiness Network, CRN. Instruction is provided through a mix of deep dive explanations, simplified everyday language guides, and through a mix of deep dive, let me start over. Instruction is provided through a mix of deep dive explanations, simplified everyday language guides, and repeatable drills. The goal is not to have just exposure to the information, but retention and capability. That's why each topic is paired with practical exercises that reinforce learning through action, allowing members to build confidence and competence over time without requiring formal classroom or rigid schedules. The system works by cycling members through a continuous loop: learn, apply, assess, and refine. A concept is introduced, broken down into understandable terms, and then immediately tied to a drill or a real-world application. Members are encouraged to practice these skills in low-pressure environments, evaluate what worked and what didn't, and make incremental improvements. This approach builds durable readiness by turning knowledge into habit, and over time, individual skills begin to connect, creating a broader, more capable readiness posture at both the personal and group level. So that's the concept of how the training will work. We will expose members to the concept of the training. Then we will provide, as it says here, we will provide the drills, real life scenarios and that sort of thing, and at your own pace and at your own leisure. And if you want to do this, it's not an absolute requirement. It's not anything you're going to be tested on. It's not anything that, if you elect not to do it, you're not going to be, banished from the group or anything. So it's just a training aid, like any other training aid, and we hope that you will take it and use it, and we can all grow from there. Now again, all of this is brand new, all of this is conceptual. We're going to hope that after first contact everything still stands the way that we pretty much have it planned, but don't be surprised if as this being a work in progress, some things may change along the way. Hopefully some for the better, some might be deleted. It just depends on how workable the concept is, and hopefully everyone will take it for what it is, and kind of make it your own once you're doing the drills on your own, and really challenge yourself to real life what if this was a real situation. So anyway, having said all of that, let's get started with the training. Let me get a couple of things moved around and we'll get started. Be right back. All right, welcome to Module 1 of the Bobby Bama Brigade training curriculum. Again, I'll apologize. I'm going to reference my notes here in front of me. I may go off script every once in a while, and hopefully I won't go down too many rabbit holes, and hopefully this shouldn't take terribly long. I'm shooting for 8 to 10 to 12 minutes if everything goes correctly. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started. Training module number 1 is known as the foundations of readiness. A lot of people in this space talk about preparedness like it's the finish line. Buy the gear, stack the supplies, build the kit, fill the shelves, check the box. You feel like you're done. And to a point you are. But that's not the finish line. We all know that's not the finish line. In a lot of cases, that's just the starting point. Because preparedness is what you have. Readiness is what you can actually do with what you have when the conditions are ugly, the timeline is short, and people are looking to you for answers. This is one thing of the training we're hoping will instill the confidence in each and every one of the members to be able to be a leader in your group, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your local CRN, just however you have it set up. Going on, preparedness is the generator. Readiness is being able to get it running at night in bad weather while someone's asking you 3 questions and another person is already frustrated. Preparedness is your medical kit. Readiness is recognizing what matters first, putting hands where they need to go, giving clear instructions, and not becoming a part of the problem. As Jay at Prepared Citizens Training Group often says, be an asset. If you're not trained, if you're not competent, if you're not confident, and if you're not able to keep your cool under pressure, you won't be an asset. You'll become a liability, even though you may not want to be and you're not trying to be, but you become somebody else's problem at that point. Preparedness is a radio. Communications, we all know, is one of the top things that we all need. Readiness is being able to pass a useful message on your radio when the signal is weak, the information is complete, and everyone is stepping on each other. There is nothing more telling about organized chaos than being on a emergency call in law enforcement. You have multiple agencies responding. Each and every one of us had our own way of dealing with things and protocols. And when you get 4 or 5, you get more than 2 police officers in one room, it's organized chaos. I promise you. You have alpha males, alpha females, and it can get really weird really quick. Anyway, so that's the distinction. And if members do not understand the distinction early, they can waste years building the appearance of capability without building the real thing. We all know what it's like. You sit there, you look at all this stuff that you bought over the years, and you go, man, I'm a prepared citizen. And then you stop and think, if you're like me, the first thing that came to grab my attention was I had bought tourniquets, I had bought pressure bandages, I had bought all that stuff. And then, again, Jay at Prepared Citizen in one of his presentations asked about, do you know how to use this stuff? And it was just such an eye-opener for me that I had it. I'd watched some YouTube videos. I hadn't even taken it out of the packaging. So these are the kind of things that we're trying to bring to everyone's attention. And it may seem very remedial, and I hope I'm not insulting anyone's level of competence or intelligence, but sometimes if you don't think about it, if you don't talk about it, you don't realize, well, I'm in that same boat. It may not be in the medical, but it might be in the radios. It might be in, this, that, or the other. And I dare say that none of us, as I will tell you 100 times, I am not an expert. I am learning. I am constantly evolving and trying to get better at my skills. And as most of you know, I'm working today, so I had to stop and catch a business call. Sorry about that. So this is not just another talk about why gear matters. Everybody already knows that gear matters. The deeper question is, what actually makes a person, a family, or a group more functional under pressure? That's what we're all after. Why this matters more than people think. Preparedness culture can accidentally give people a false sense of security. They feel serious because they bought the serious looking equipment. We all have scary black guns. We all have radios. We all have all the other things that if somebody were to walk into your hooch, as Modern Minuteman calls it, or my office or your storage room or whatever you call where your items are stored, and if someone's not in the know, they would be absolutely overwhelmed by what they see. People feel confident because they have watched content, they've read manuals, and they talk through scenarios. We've all done that too. I remember having a basic concept of map reading and orienting, and land nav. And the first time I actually sat down with people that knew what they were doing and went, okay, here's a compass and here's this, and tell me how we're going to get to here. Whole different ball of wax. So preparedness can give that false sense of security, but confidence built on imagination is also fragile. Pressure exposes what's real. That's why readiness is a better word than preparedness for what we're trying to build. Readiness is not about having a plan that you're proud of. It's about having habits, standards, and repetition that holds together when life quits cooperating. And for that reason, I want to push this hard, is because members deserve more than recycled cliches and advice. They deserve usable thinking. They deserve something they can actually train. And that's what we're hoping to provide here. Friction is the test. What's meant by that is that friction is a word that matters. Friction is everything that makes a simple task harder in the real world than it looks in your head. How many times have all of us looked at something and said, oh, I can do that. And then when you actually get ready to do it and you actually put your hands on it, you're like, no, I can't do this. I better call somebody. At least that's the way I am. Friction is also poor light. Friction is cold hands. Friction is a dead phone battery. Friction is somebody panicking beside you and that has lost their head, in chaos. Friction is fatigue, and friction will cause fatigue. Friction is uncertainty, and friction is trying to make a decision before you have the full picture. Bobby Bama is the #1 culprit in making a decision before I have the full. I'm not as bad as I was 20 years ago, I can assure you, but it happens. Especially if it's something that you're really confident about. You've seen a similar situation, you've seen a similar scenario, and you're convinced that you know the full story before you know the full story. Friction, before you know the full picture. That's why so many people can perform tasks at home, at a desk, in peace and quiet, and they struggle with the same task when the environment gets really noisy and inconvenient. I mean, think about that. 1,000 times you have done certain things, and then when there's some chaos in your office or upheaval at your house, or your kids bring their friends in, what became so routine 5 minutes ago, you become distracted, and it becomes a struggle for you to do that. So one of the first readiness lessons is simple. Don't just ask, can I do this? Ask, can I do this when friction is added? When there's undue stress, when there's, God forbid, life and death decisions that have to be made. Can I find the gear in the dark? How many times has the light gone off and we're stumbling around in the dark looking for our flashlight? And God knows what will happen if it really becomes a terrible situation. Can I explain the plan in 1 minute instead of 10? Can I send a message clearly when I don't have the perfect information? Can I treat this problem in the rain? Can I do it in the cold? Can I do it after I've been up for, 16, 20, 24, 48 hours? That is much more of an honest standard. Here's an applied example. Say a blackout. Take the simple house gold blackout, just as I said a few minutes ago. Your lights go out, you're stumbling around looking for the flashlight if you don't know exactly where it is and can find it in the dark. And on paper, this is very basic. In reality, it's one of the cleanest readiness tests that there is. The prepared person owns a flashlight, battery, lanterns, backup charging, maybe a generator, maybe shelf-stable food, maybe a small stove. It's all good, it's all necessary, and it's what we should all have. None of that is wasted. But the ready person already knows where the lights are, who checks the breakers, who checks on family members, what power is needed, what needs to be powered first, the refrigerator, your freezers, what can wait, what the fallback lighting plan is. Everybody needs a pace plan. How long the backup power realistically will last, and what they are not going to waste precious fuel on. I know the first time we had a hurricane came off the Gulf Coast and traveled up into our area, knocked out power for almost a week, and we had a brand new generator. And man, I was so proud of that generator, and I had all the extension cords that I needed, and I was trying to power everything, and before I know it, the fuel's starting, and I've got to go. I shouldn't have to be putting fuel in there. Well, if I wasn't trying to run the whole house on 5,000 watts, it would have been a lot easier. Going on, that person who knows, who's trained, who's ready, who's done the drills before these things happen, that person is not inventing the system in the middle of the event. You're not doing it on the fly. They already simplified the problem before the problem showed up. Same tool, same outages, very different outcome. Another thing, standards beat motivation. The next level that readiness builds is on standards, not on vibes. You don't think you know it. You know. A lot of people have enthusiasm. A lot of groups have strong opinions, but enthusiasm is not a system, and opinions are not procedures. Readiness gets stronger the moment people answer boring questions clearly. What gets checked first? Who's responsible for checking for things? What gets reported? In what format? Who is responsible for what? What is the backup if the first method fails? What and where's the rally point? What is the no-fail gear list for this task? What is the minimum acceptable standard? All of this sounds like we're talking about trying to do this in a brigade setting. Well, we are. But this also applies to a 1-2 person group, a wife and a husband, a boyfriend and a girlfriend, cousins. And it can be applied at the very basic level, at the very least number of people, even just one person. If you apply these things to one person all the way up to 10, 15, 20 member groups, you won't go wrong. You will be confidently ready to handle the situation as it presents itself. Basically, as this says here, this stuff does not sound glamorous, but it's what keeps a group from dissolving into confusion when the tempo rises. Just imagine your own family scenario. I know with my kids, grandkids, it's nobody's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never their fault. That's just the way it happens. And then you apply stressors, and it just gets worse from there. Motivation helps you start. Standards help you repeat. That's what's important, because readiness is not proven by one good day. It's proven by consistency. Again, it's often said that we fall to the level of our training. So if you only train once, you're going to fall really quick. If you've trained 100 times, you're less likely to fail and fall as fast. But you will revert back to that level of training. Now, an applied example for communications. Let's use communications because that's where a lot of people learn lessons the hard way. I learned it as a law enforcement officer. You know, the first time you have to involve yourself with physical contact, get shot at, have to shoot back. I mean, it just, and it's remarkable. Or the first time you pull up on a horrible traffic accident and the people that are involved are, you know, high school friends. It's a very tough thing to deal with. You have to gain your composure, you have to maintain your composure, and you have to communicate clearly and effectively to, in my situation, having high school friends that were involved, unfortunately, in a fatal traffic accident, you know, I had to communicate clearly to the rescue personnel that were coming, you know, what we needed, how many people were we going to need extra hands. So communications is a vital lesson to learn, and it's often learned the hard way. Preparedness says we bought the radio, and that's great. That's just step one. Readiness asks, what's the primary channel? What's the alternative? What is the check-in time? What's the message format? What's our brevity standard? What happens if one member misses the call? What information is actually worth transmitting and what can wait? A group with standards can pass short, decision-driving information. A group without standards usually produces noise. I can honestly say that I have had 2 situations in law enforcement where a senior management, sergeant and above, had to take control of the radio and tell everybody to calm down. You know, get your shit together. Was basically what he said. This is all very important. A group without standards, useful, decisive driving information. The one without standards produces the noise, as I said before. That's why training should include short message drills, not just turning the radio on, actually passing useful, clean information, who you are, where you are, what happened, what you need, what you're going to do next. The sequence matters more than intensity. Another readiness lesson people miss is that sequence matters more than intensity. A lot of mistakes under pressure happen because people do not know what to do first. They're not lazy, they're not weak, they're just disorganized, and the moment makes it that much more disorganized. And all of that's fixable. What you train, when you train a sequence, you lower cognitive load, you give yourself an order of operations that keeps small chaos from becoming large chaos. Again, relating back to my law enforcement, we had standard SOPs that when we answered certain kind of calls, there were, unless something was way out of the ordinary or was imperative that it had to be done outside of the SOP, when we rolled up, we reported certain things in a certain order, and it was consistent regardless. Making a traffic stop, you give the tag number, you give the make and model of the vehicle, how many occupants are in the vehicle, and if there's any particular situation that you see the occupants engaged in, like they're trying to hide something under the seat or pour beer out of an open window or something. A lot of mistakes happen under pressure because people do not know what to do first. Again, they're not lazy, they're not weak, they're just disorganized. That is a fixable thing. We train in sequences and to lower your cognitive load. In medical responses, sequences matter. In communications, sequence matters. In equipment setup, sequence matter. In movement, accountability checks, even loading vehicles, sequences matter. A calm sequence beats frantic energy almost every time. Another applied example in the medical response. Think about a bleeding injury. The prepared person owns a trauma kit. Good, that matters. The ready person has mentally rehearsed what to do when they see blood, how they get control of themselves, how do they address the most dangerous problem first, and how do they direct other people instead of letting them hover uselessly, and how they communicate when already done once help arrives. I remember, again, let me get back to a personal recollection. First time I answered a call where a woman was having a baby and the paramedics got there, and I can remember somebody asking the paramedics, should we go boil water? And the paramedic said, yeah, that's a great idea. And I can remember after the fact asking that paramedic, why did he send him to boil water? And he said, I just needed him out of my hair. That gave him something to do. So those are the kind of things that we need to think of. Doesn't require any superhero skills. It just requires repetition, sequence, and enough composure to avoid wasting time on panic. That's why readiness training should not be about acquiring gear. It should be about hands-on repetition, time setup, verbal steps, and decision making under mild stresses. We've seen recently the different challenges that have been put forth on YouTube about the 3 and flee, can you grab your gear and bug out within 5 minutes, and you saw how the stress of the time made people forget things that they would have never forgotten had time not been compressed. The next section, readiness is a discipline of simplification. People sometimes imagine readiness is becoming more and more complex. The more gear, more scenarios, more contingencies, more layers. But mature readiness often looks very simplified. It's asking what's essential, what's repeatable, and what breaks it the most often. That's a different mindset from constantly just adding stuff. I think we probably all have been guilty of that. I know I have. Simple systems survive stress better than fancy systems people barely can understand. The acronym for Keep It Simple Stupid is really what we're talking about here. Your emergency lighting plan depends on 6 scattered items, 2 phone apps, 3 specialty batteries, and remembering where you stored the adapter. Then your plan's not as strong as it looks if that's your plan. Readiness takes complexity and compresses it into usable action. An applied example there, an evacuation or a rapid movement. Take evacuation. A lot of people picture this as some dramatic movie event. Usually it's much less dramatic and much more annoying. A fast-moving weather event, a local fire, a hazardous spill, a sudden need to leave because staying put quit making sense. Preparedness is having bags, documents, fuel, maps, medication, and critical items staged, which is all good. Readiness is knowing when your trigger points for leaving, knowing what absolutely must go with you, knowing what gets abandoned without debate, knowing how long loadout takes actually, and knowing whether your family or group can move without turning the driveway into a committee meeting. I swear that was written for my family. That's worth practicing. Time it, run it once, see what breaks, see what people forget, see where the confusion shows up, and that's how readiness gets built. Now, stability is a real objective. Another teaching point that deserves more attention is this: survival is not the whole goal. Stability matters even more. Anybody can talk about getting through the first 10 minutes. Readiness asks whether or not you can function after the first 10 minutes. You can maintain order in the next hour, the next day, the next stage. Can you preserve communication, accountability, discipline, and basic morale after the initial shock wears off? And I think that's one thing that everybody, unless you've experienced it, you don't grasp until after the fact how shock affects. I remember the first really bad situation that I was in, and I smoked then. I can remember thinking to myself, man, you sure are being calm. And about 5 minutes after it was over and we were standing around leaning against a patrol car talking about, what happened, I went to light a cigarette, and I absolutely couldn't light my cigarette because my hands were shaking so bad. The adrenaline wore off, the shock wore off, the initial, oh my God, this is a bad situation, wore off, and then it all comes flooding back at that particular time. There's a difference between response and a stable operating posture. If you're thinking in terms of family leadership or community leadership or group continuity, stability is the standard that actually matters. If you can't keep it together, how are you supposed to keep your group together? How are you supposed to keep your family together? Again, something that Jay spoke about the other day about answering a call, where understanding that children, they follow the lead. They feed off of the energy that an adult, a family member, a teacher gives off. And if you're giving off a frantic, fearful, oh my God, the world's coming to an end, that child's going to understand that. They're going to comprehend it, and they're going to parrot that. And it's vital that we don't do that, especially when you're the leader. Preparedness helps you absorb and take a hit. It really does. It's preparedness. It truly is like training. First time you get shot at, the first time you have to do something you've never done before, the first time you have to apply a tourniquet, the first time you have to do anything that requires you to do something for the first time. If you're not prepared for it, it really will affect you, and it really will hit you, just as it says. Readiness helps you organize the next phase. Who checks on people? How do you handle information rumors? How do you ration fuel, time, attention? What actually matters today? What can wait? How does one person keep from carrying the whole load while everyone else around you is asking the question? For group readiness, is not just about individual skills. It's a culture problem. A group can have capable individuals and skills and still perform poorly because they don't have shared standards. They do not communicate in the same way, and they have never practiced working through friction together. This is where training, whether it's on the range or whether it is handing out MREs or water or whatever, this is absolutely spot on. That is why group readiness requires common language, common expectation, and common habits. Back in my day, originally in law enforcement, there were no such things. Everybody flew by the seat of their pants, and by the time I left law enforcement, we actually had, the only thing that truly bonded law enforcement together back in the day was the 10 code. We all used the same 10 code for a traffic stop, or this, that, and the other. But like learning how to deal with SWAT situations, we had to come up and train and learn for the common language. The other thing too is when you're asked to provide an update, whether it's over a radio or to the group, what are the thresholds for speaking up? How do you hand off a task? How do you acknowledge the directions? How do you debrief a mistake without it turning into a theatrical production? Those things determine whether a group becomes more reliable over time or just louder. Picture a simple team task. One member is gathering information, one's handling communication, one member is checking supplies, one's coordinating movement. Nothing complicated. But if a team never trains together, everybody either overtalks, duplicates effort, or assumes somebody else is handling the critical step. A lot of people, leadership under pressure is usually quieter than people think. A lot of people imagine leadership under stress as somebody barking orders and looking intense. Sometimes urgency is real, but most good leadership under pressure is quieter than you think. It looks more like prioritizing. It looks like calming the pace without slowing necessary action. It looks like framing the problem simply. It looks like assigning one task instead of delivering a speech. It looks like reducing confusion. That is one reason readiness matters so much for leaders. And this is the things we're hoping to teach. We want to teach leaders about readiness. If you're not intentionally organized or internally organized, you will export confusion to everyone around you. A leader does not need to know everything, but they need to preserve structure while facts are still incomplete. This is a teachable skill. It gets stronger when leaders rehearse short decisions, short directions, and short debriefs instead of waiting for real events to teach them in public. Now, how can members train for this? We want to make this a practical exercise. How do members build readiness instead of just admiring the idea or feeling like they have a concept of what readiness is? First, you train the basics under mild friction. You run drills in low light. You put a timer on setup task. You practice with gloves. You practice after a long day when you're not fresh. You practice explaining a plan out loud in 30 seconds. So basically, you force yourself to do things outside of your comfort zone. It's not sitting around a coffee table, or a kitchen table having a cup of coffee and just explaining this in theory. You're actually going to stress yourself. Second, build small standards. Use checklists for recurring tasks. Use common reporting formats. Decide what good enough looks like before you're stressed. Third, rehearse decision points. At what point do you leave? At what point do you call for help? At what point do you switch from the primary plan to a backup plan? Decision points save time because they reduce hesitation. The fourth thing, debrief honestly. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with your team members. Have them be honest with you. After a drill or even real inconvenience, ask what worked, what failed, what was slower than expected, what did we forget, what caused confusion, and what single improvement would pay off the next time. It's not just important to have that discussion. It's important that you memorialize it, write it down, fix the problem while there's not a problem going on, and then practice that so that you don't forget the situation or find yourself in the situation the next time. Okay, the fifth and final thing is stop measuring seriousness about how much stuff you own. What's the saying that the person with the most toys when they die wins? Well, that's not the case in this situation. Just because you have the most toys, the most kit, the most, of everything doesn't necessarily mean that you're the most prepared. So you should measure it by how smoothly you can perform ordinary tasks when their conditions are not real. You can have 20 gazillion thousand rounds of ammunition, but if you have to leave, how are you going to get that out the door? How are you going to get it out under stress? How are you going to get it out, God forbid, if you're under fire? Have you just left a stockpile of ammunition for bad guys? So you have to think about these things, have to plan, have to organize your inventory. You have to do the things that are necessary to avoid these situations. And if you're like me, if you don't think about it, it won't just pop in my mind all of a sudden one day. It might, but it's not likely. Okay, so here's a few training examples. These are a few drills that can actually teach you something. A blackout drill. Kill the lights, start a timer, see how long it takes to establish light, accountability, and a basic operating plan. I know that's very rudimentary. I know that's hopefully not insulting to your intelligence, but think about it. I mean, it is probably the most common thing, regardless of whether you live in Alaska or you live in Florida or you live in Pennsylvania. These are going to happen, or you live anywhere in between. Communication drills. Pass short reports from one person to another using a fixed format. Then do it again with background noise or incomplete information. And I will tell you, I probably have more radios than anybody else in the world, and I don't do this as often as I should. And it's one thing that's on my list of things to fix. Loadout drills. How long it takes to get critical items staged for departure, then identify what caused delays and confusion. Medical drills. Practicing locating and deploying your medical kits, verbalizing the sequences, and assigning a person a useful support task. Then one thing that I am not very good at, but I'm working at getting better at, is an after-action drill. After any practice, spend 5 minutes identifying one thing to keep, one thing to fix, and one thing to simplify. It's very simple in concept, but it takes you sitting down and actually doing it to accomplish it. And I can give you 1,000 reasons why I don't, but I don't. I just don't make the time. This is the kind of training that's not real flashy. It builds members who can think, function instead of just talk. So here's the bottom line, and I hope I haven't gotten way off time, but preparedness is valuable, but it's incomplete. Gear matters, but gear's only potential until a disciplined person turns it into performance. Readiness is what closes the gap between ownership and usefulness. It is what lets people function when friction shows up. It is what lets leaders stabilize rather than dramatize. It is what lets a group become dependable instead of just enthusiastic. And that is the standard members should be aiming for. Not just having equipment, not just having interest, not just having opinions, but building repeatable competence. Because when pressure hits, you don't magically rise to your best intentions. You usually fall back on your habits, your standards, your sequence, and your culture. You fall back to your level of training. So build all of these with purpose. Buy what you need, learn what you have, practice under friction, simplify what's too complex, debrief what breaks, and keep moving from possessions towards performance. That's how preparedness grows into readiness, and that is the foundation everyone should be building towards. I hope that wasn't too painful. I hope I didn't go too terribly long, but I believe all of these things are vitally important. Now, I mentioned the drills. I will attach links to the various drills and some other documentation that I want to include for the brigade members to have access to. Download it, print it, use it, store it, but it's available for you to, I would encourage you to try to do some of the things that are listed on. Again, sorry if I went long, sorry if it was too terribly painful to listen to. I promise I will get better. We're planning on having a live question and answer session this coming Friday, which is Good Friday, and I didn't realize that when I scheduled that. So if that's not good for you, if the majority of you are going to be busy doing other things, let me know. We can reschedule it. I have to go ahead and tell you, I have to be in South Alabama very early Friday morning, be there probably half a day, so I might be a little later getting started if we don't reschedule to a different time, but it shouldn't be too much later. I actually should be back, but just want to give everyone in the brigade a heads up, just in case I am. I'll try to let everyone know if it looks like it's going to be much later or readjust or whatever. But anyway, having said all of that, I hope this was beneficial. I hope it's something that you will take to heart and at least give some consideration. Download the drills, look at the documentation that's going to be provided in the links, and I look forward to your questions and answers for Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time.